This deposit certificate is named Zheng Weixian, which has been rapidly circulating on Chinese networks recently. One of the images is a bank deposit certificate, showing that this person holds a one-year fixed deposit of 300 billion Chinese yuan, approximately 42.7 billion US dollars, at the China Agricultural Bank's Hong Kong branch. The other image is a fund authorization inquiry letter indicating that the deposit owner themselves have authorized Chinese government agencies to access their bank account information. The Chinese statement on the document corresponds to the amount of 300 billion Chinese yuan. This fund can generate 640 million US dollars in profit within 1 year. But how did this person legally possess such an enormous amount of money? Let's put that aside for now. Firstly, we need to clarify that even someone like Warren Buffett, the major shareholder of Berkshire Hathaway, with a net worth of $118 billion, cannot come up with such a large amount of cash all at once. That's because the net worth of billionaires represents their total wealth, but it doesn't necessarily reflect their immediate liquidity. The wealth of billionaires is often tied up in assets such as stocks, real estate, investment portfolios, and so on, which are not readily convertible to cash. The net worth figures listed on Forbes' billionaire rankings do not directly indicate their immediate cash availability. On the other hand, let's take a look at why this bank deposit certificate caused such a stir on the internet in China, but was quickly noticed by the authorities and subsequently blocked. The fundamental reason is that the amount mentioned in the certificate is simply too large for an average person to comprehend. It exceeds the limits of imagination. According to official statistics from both China and the United States, the average annual income for Chinese individuals is approximately $5,164, while in the United States, it is $60,575. Let us hear what the former Prime Minister has to say.
中国是一个人口众多的发展中国家，我们人均年收入的平均水平是3万元人民币，但是有6亿人每个月的收入也就是1000元，1000元，在一个中等城市可能租房都困难。
The inevitable outcome for such a prime minister with an unwavering conscience and outspokenness is, of course, to be marginalized and compelled to resign under the pressure of Xi Jinping. However, in a wilderness where all vital resources are controlled by state power, what would be the fate of those self-made billionaires who have risen from nothing, overcoming numerous obstacles and challenges with their bare hands? Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, was once the richest person in China. In China, the only way to bypass the monopoly and restrictions imposed by state-owned enterprises is by developing new forms of social productivity, such as internet applications. Jack Ma accomplished that. However, he couldn't escape the original sin of being an entrepreneur born in China, which is being forced to compromise with the government. Jack Ma merely expressed concerns about the significant wealth disparity in China, which drew dissatisfaction from the government. However, regardless of the circumstances, the fate of Chinese entrepreneurs is often to be forcibly subjected to government intervention and eventually removed from their positions as CEOs, with the government exerting control through forced capital injections. In the end, they become scapegoats for the voracious interest gatherers, serving as sacrificial lambs in the spotlight, as seen on the Forbes rich. However, we still need to understand why Chinese entrepreneurs are being used as a shield for the interests of the CCP. Firstly, the compilation process of the Forbes list is typically based on publicly available information, such as financial statements of publicly traded companies, ownership details, and other disclosed documents. This means that if the beneficiary families do not find individuals to hold their shares, their identities are likely to be exposed. Secondly, the Forbes list has already been acquired by a Hong Kong-based company, which further reveals the CCP's ambition to interfere with the rankings. It is widely known that the high-ranking members of the CCP, especially the descendants of the elder families, undoubtedly possess vast amounts of wealth. After all, the so-called red aristocrats, represented by the 8 immortals families, have divided among themselves all the necessary resources. Their descendants often exercise control over companies through wholly owned subsidiaries, acting discreetly. However, there are exceptions as well. Li Xiaolin, for example, is the daughter of the former Chinese premier Li Peng. As the chairperson and executive director of several Chinese companies, she is considered the de facto controller of the entire Chinese power system. She often appears prominently in the media. However, in 2016, she became embroiled in a controversy and scandal. The release of the Panama Papers in 2016, which contained offshore company information involving political figures from various countries, caused significant uproar. It implicated several high-ranking CCP families, including the family to which Li Xiaolin belongs. Combining her high-profile behavior and her statement, "My success did not rely on my father but on my own," Chinese netizens immediately expressed their discontent in a mocking tone. Furthermore, some internet users pointed out that the assets of these red descendants are estimated to be as high as $500 billion for an individual. This claim is not entirely unfounded because the domestic market demand in China is immense. Just imagine, when you control resources like tobacco, oil, electricity, and others, each small portion of the consumption of essential goods ends up in your pocket. You can imagine how wealthy you would become. It's like being born with control over the entire national oil resources, just like a Saudi Arabian prince. However, in China, the oil resource translates into the labor of the people. Despite China's concerted efforts to portray itself as a country aligned with world civilization, it cannot conceal the fact that it is an authoritarian state that sustains a small group of people through the labor of 1.3 billion workers. Countless ordinary individuals are unable to realize any self-worth throughout their lives due to an extraordinarily distorted wealth distribution system where any path to wealth must be linked to power. This has created a situation in which people don't even have time to ponder why uttering a wrong word could lead to imprisonment. Their sole focus is consumed by the fundamental question of how to survive. The reason this system continues to operate is that the government ingeniously employs a propaganda machine to subtly control taxation, manipulate public opinion, influence education, and even utilize state violence to suppress dissenters. Today's situation is even worse than before because Xi Jinping has acquired absolute power, which means that China has transitioned from a system of collective leadership among party elders in the past 50 years to a dictatorship. The Communist Party of China no longer promotes individuals with advanced thinking for the sake of economic development. Instead, all top-level officials must have been under Xi Jinping's command at some point. This creates a situation where there is no longer any internal check and balance within the country. I acknowledge that the previous conduct of the party elders was deplorable, but at least they had some motivation to improve China's economy to maintain the legitimacy of their rule. Now, these officials who have Xi Jinping as their backer will shamelessly amass wealth. These invisible billionaires with fortunes worth $500 billion will not disappear. They will simply be replaced by a different group of people. If you're interested in my content, please subscribe to my channel, and let's meet again in the next episode.